Hey there, everybody. How you doing? We're gonna play some Enduro here in a little bit, but first of all, I want to welcome you guys back to Pete Plays. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a little bit since the last video. Um, Things are okay, a bit crazy. Um, there's been a chipmunk invasion in the apartment, which has been fun to deal with. In fact, just as I was getting ready to sit down and record this, I can hear the chipmunk chewing away at something in the closet that I have it sealed in. So that's fun. So I've been dealing with the chipmunk. Was getting ready for the new job, which is now delayed by a couple of weeks. I don't start until early next month now, so I've got a little bit more downtime, which is not preferable, but it is what it is. Um, so yeah, so things have been going on behind the scenes, but I am here. I am back. We're gonna play some Enduro from 1983, and of course, we're gonna talk about the Microsoft acquisition of Activision. Um, it is on the forefront of everyone's mind. It's something that people are still kind of in disbelief that it actually happened. There is a lot of panic going on about what it means for people who are not Xbox owners or not PC players. And there's a lot of stuff to sort out. So I thought that I would give my 2 cents on the acquisition and what it means, and try and break things down in a civil manner, not overreacting, but just kind of trying to be realistic about what's going on. First of all, a little bit about the game I'm playing. This is called Enduro from 1983. This is a racing game, as you can see. The idea of the game is to pass a certain number of cars before the day ends. So there's a cycle of racing that you go through. You get some regular racing, some on snow racing you see here. You'll race in the dark, you'll race in the fog. Um, but you have to pass, like right now, I have to go through 112 more cars before the time it runs out. The score is the number of miles that you drive, which is the meter you see rolling, the pedometer that you see. So right now I have 54 miles. This is just, for me, I've always had fun playing this. For me, it's a chill kind of game. And it's one of those games that only ends when your skill is no longer good enough to meet the requirements the game sets for you. Like when you don't pass the certain number of cars, like your game ends. Otherwise, you could be playing for hours if you're that good. So now I talked about Enduro. Let's talk about this deal, shall we? So let's talk about what we know first. What we know is that Microsoft has entered into an agreement to acquire Activision for a sum that's about $69 billion with a B. Nice number, right? The deal is not done yet by a long shot. It has to go through regulators, like federal regulators. So it's going to be at least a year, probably, if not a little bit longer. And there's even been some speculation that the federal government won't even let it go through. So we don't know what's going to happen just yet. But we're going to operate for the purposes of this episode of Pete Plays that the deal is going to happen and it's going to go through and Microsoft will be in control, let's say in 2024 or 2023. I'm sorry, let's say that. So what this means is that all of Activision's properties, intellectual properties, so Enduro here is an example. Granted, we haven't seen a new Enduro game in 40 years, but Enduro, Pitfall, Keystone Capers, whoops, Pressure Cooker, Space Shuttle is a copywritten, or is like an independent, in a licensed property, so they can't use that. Decathlon. So all of these Atari games would be in the package. Call of Duty would be in there. Overwatch would be in there. Warcraft would be in there. Diablo would be in there. If there was any possibility of bringing back Skylanders, that would be in there. Crash and Spyro would be in there. So there is a fair amount of intellectual property involved in this deal, which is what made it so attractive to Microsoft in the first place. Microsoft is a company that's been struggling to build its own stable of games. It doesn't have a lot of first party support. The first party support that it's had, like say Rare, is completely different and hasn't really done much for Microsoft, which is too bad. But in acquiring Bethesda, which they did not that long ago, and now Activision, it really fills up that stable. You now have development teams in your purview that can help you to build new franchises or build on existing ones. And that is such an important thing to have in this day and age. You need to have games that people are interested in order for them to buy your console and or buy into your subscription service. And this is really where the conversation is going to go now. In my opinion, I believe that this deal made sense for Microsoft because Microsoft is looking to build Xbox Game Pass into something that is going to be very difficult for any video game fan to ignore. As long as they have a PC or as long as they have an Xbox One or an Xbox Series console, or if they have a tablet or a mobile phone, if they want to do things via the cloud, which is not recommended, but hopefully will get better as time goes on. You can subscribe to Game Pass and get a pretty good deal on games to play. And you'll spend however much money every 3 months or every year or whatever the period of time is that Microsoft has for the subscription. If you think about the possibilities, think about a service kind of like Netflix, where for one set price, you can play every Call of Duty game, you can play every Diablo game, you can play these games, like these older arcade type Atari 2600 games. You could play the Crash Bandicoot games that Activision made, like the remakes. And you could play whatever else comes down the pike, all for one low price or one price. I can't say it's low because it really depends on what Microsoft wants to do. That is value proposition. That is a good value proposition, and that's what Microsoft is looking to do. So the deal makes sense. Now, how did the deal come to be? There are different stories. My theory is that Activision's value, like perceived value, took a hit with all of the controversy that surrounded the company, with the delays that the company has seen in some of its software, and with the declining quality of some of the games that the company has published. I think you take all those factors, you put them all together, and all of a sudden, Activision looks ripe for an acquisition. The controversy is real. We know that the controversy is real, even though some people want to deny it, say that's not a big deal, it doesn't matter, that it's all about the games, whatever it is. But it's a big deal to the employees, understandably so, and it's a big deal to the perception of the company. The company is getting dragged through the mud with stories about Bobby Kotick and him not taking action when there were charges of misconduct in the company. That all just looks bad. It's all perception that you can't fix. So you combine all those things, and the value of the company comes down to a point where Microsoft is ready to kind of consider it. Okay, so how much would this cost to get all of these games for one lump sum? All of these games, all of these internal development studios What am I getting for this price tag? And I think the price was right at about $69 billion. So Microsoft pulled the trigger. Bear in mind, Microsoft was the only platform holder that was going to have the money to get this done. $69 billion is about $8 billion more than Nintendo's current valuation. Not that Nintendo is ever going to sell to Microsoft, so don't get it twisted. That was never going to happen, and it's probably still not going to happen at all. But that gives you an idea of the kind of money that Microsoft has. And Microsoft has that money because it's diversified. Video games are just one segment of their business. They sell hardware. They sell software. And yeah, oh, by the way, they're still the ones that are making the operating system that is dominant in the world. You may not like Windows. You may hate it. You may be a Mac user or a Linux user or whatever, but most people and most businesses are still using Windows. And especially for businesses, they have to pay Microsoft a fee to be able to use that. So that money winds up coming back to Microsoft, and they can build themselves a pretty nice nest egg of money to sit on and to use however they see fit. Sony doesn't have that kind of money. Sony will never have that kind of money. Whether that's fair or unfair, that's just kind of the way it is. And Nintendo is never going to be in that position either. Good company. They make great games, but they're just not going to make that kind of money. Let's see if I can put on one last run. I need to get past 5. Woo, that was close. So what does the acquisition mean to everybody? So let's start with Microsoft. Like, if you're an Xbox owner, what does this mean for you? It means you're going to want to get Game Pass pretty soon, if you haven't already. And a lot of Xbox owners have Game Pass subscriptions. It makes sense. It is undoubtedly the best value in gaming, as long as you don't mind not owning your stuff. If you're just looking for a library of games to pick and choose from every month, that's the way to go. So if you're an Xbox owner, this just makes Game Pass even more indispensable. Like, you need to have it to get all of those games, because I can tell you that's where those games are going to go. It could mean that certain games may be exclusive. It won't be Call of Duty. I can almost guarantee that. I could see possibly Diablo. Maybe. Not a definite, but possibly. What more realistically I think happens, especially in Call of Duty's case, is there's going to be certain content that Microsoft may decide to gate off for Xbox or Xbox Game Pass users. That's just a supposition on my part. That's me speculating, but that tends to make the most sense. I honestly don't see a scenario where Microsoft takes every single IP that they've purchased, given the Activision acquisition, and says, all right, this is all Xbox now. You don't have an Xbox, or you don't have Xbox Game Pass. Too bad, so sad. I don't see that happening. Microsoft's not doing that now with Minecraft, for example. There are certain franchises that are just too big, that are too valuable, that make too much money across a wide variety of platforms for Microsoft to say, yeah, no, not now. So that's the way I see that whole thing shaking out for Microsoft. For Sony, if you're a Call of Duty fan, you got nothing to worry about. Call of Duty, if you're a Call of Duty fan and you play every year, got no worries. It's still going to happen. There may be some content that's missing, but I don't think it will be enough to make it not worth playing. For Nintendo fans, this doesn't affect you very much at all, with the exception of Spyro the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot and maybe Diablo, where Switch fans lucked into a really good port of Diablo 3. I really don't see it making a big difference. I think that Nintendo is going to be just fine, although issues with the Switch really showing its age now and being difficult to downport modern games to is going to be a problem until the chip shortage ends and Nintendo can deliver hardware that can match up, which they may not even be able to do. In terms of the future, this is not going to be the last of the acquisition deals that you will see. I can't tell you when the next one will be, but I can tell you that one will happen. The likely acquisition targets, if there was to be one anytime soon, would be Sega and Square Enix. If I was a betting person, which I'm not because I don't have any money, if I was a betting person, I would say that Sony would be the best suitor for Square Enix, given its long-standing relationship with the publisher, with the company. I could see Nintendo trying to make a play, but I think that Square Enix would resist any kind of acquisition from Nintendo. The other acquisition target would be Sega, which is the cheapest, and I put cheap in air quotes because Sega itself is worth about $4 billion, which is more money than you, I, and like 50 of our best friends will ever see in our lifetime. But Sega, remember, not only has all of the legacy arcade games and Genesis games and Dreamcast games, but they also, boy, I was close. They also have all of Atlus's library because they acquired Atlus. So now you have this stable of RPGs and other unique software that could bolster your library. I don't think that Microsoft is going to be able to pull off one of those deals. It's just a hunch, but I just think that Japanese companies would resist an acquisition by a Western company if they can help it. And I think that despite some pratfalls, like with Sonic Colors Ultimate and a few other games that just didn't sell well, I don't think Sega is in a position, even though the valuation is pretty low, I don't think that they're like takeover ripe just yet. Now, Square is an interesting case. I think there's an argument that could be made that Square Enix could be looking at a buyer. I think that some games have been caught in development hell. I think that development prices for Square games have gotten more expensive to prohibitively expensive. Some of the games have been disasters, like The Avengers, which was just not good at all, and basically damaged Crystal Dynamics in terms of their reputation. So it's possible that Square Enix would be interested in a buyer if the price was right. But I don't know that Sony wants to make that kind of investment. We'll have to see. Other companies that are possibilities are Konami, although I think that Konami is too diversified. They have a big gambling business. Maybe they spin off their video game stuff, but I don't know about that because some of their gambling business relies on their gaming licenses. Like everyone picks on the pachinko boards for Castlevania and Metal Gear and things, but that gets people's attention who are not on social media. So maybe Konami, but it's not a done deal. Capcom's an interesting case. I could see Sony may be making a play for them, but I don't see any weakness in Capcom to make me think that they would be interested in selling at this point. Then you have the big fish out there in Take-Two and EA, and I don't see a situation where either of those companies get swallowed up. Um, First of all, the $69 billion acquisition deal, that's probably it for a little while for Microsoft. They can talk a big game, but that's a lot of money to outlay. And you need to be able to make some money back from that before you start spending more of it. You know, the Bethesda deal was not that much money by comparison. So I could see why Microsoft would spend even more money. And again, Microsoft is flush with cash, so they can do that. But I don't see anyone ponying up the tens of billions of dollars for Take-Two, unless Grand Theft Auto 6 is a complete disaster. When, if it happens, but I just don't see that being a likely scenario. And in terms of Electronic Arts, and people have asked about that, Electronic Arts has its own subscription service that is making money from Microsoft because Microsoft has EA Play as part of its Game Pass subscription. It still has a bunch of sports licenses that it's making a fair amount of revenue from, even if the games have not been great. Looking at you, Madden NFL. And it's still worth a lot of money. You know, I do think that if there was any kind of takeover deal, I think that the licenses, the league licenses that EA has built, I think those would be in jeopardy. And I don't think the company is in a situation where they need to entertain those kind of ideas. EA might even consider an acquisition of its own, although I really don't know who, because EA is not going to buy out a Japanese company. So that's how I see that playing out. The acquisitions are not done. They may be done for now, but they're not done for good. And we'll just kind of have to see where things go. If they have to go anywhere, and I'm not saying that these acquisitions have to happen, but if they did, Sony ending up with Square, again, just makes the most sense, given their long history with Squaresoft / Square Enix from the mid-90s on. And Sega's kind of a toss-up. I think Nintendo could afford it. The optics would be weird, given the fact that Nintendo and Sega were hardcore competitors 30 years ago. It would be weird. But I think Nintendo could do it, and it makes sense, I think, for both companies. I think there's more in common with Sega and Nintendo than there is with Sega and Square Enix, and than Nintendo and Square Enix, for example. But that's my take on it. So we'll just have to see. I think the thing that I have to caution people about is that you cannot overreact right now. Sony fans are angry. Some of them just they have this weird. They've convinced themselves of this weird mistruth that Call of Duty may go away. So they've either already accepted it, they're just like, well, Call of Duty sucks anyway, or they're angry about it. There's nothing to be angry about yet. Microsoft has given absolutely no indication that they would not continue to publish Call of Duty on multiple platforms. And the only people that think this is going to be a thing are uptight Sony fans. So stop. Don't make things into things before they're things. It's alternate reality. Nobody knows anything yet. The deal's not done. Phil Spencer's got on the record and has talked about how he wishes to support more platforms once the acquisition goes through. So you're jumping to conclusions. If you've ever seen the movie Office Space, there's a sequence with a jump to conclusions mat. That's what some of you guys are doing. You're jumping on that mat for no reason. I think at this point, because the deal is still a year off from closing, I think you just kind of wait. You wait it out. You see if there are any more statements that Microsoft makes through Phil Spencer, who's really kind of the point person for these kind of transactions now. Congratulations to Phil, by the way. I think we just kind of continue business as usual. We keep our eyes open on the business side. We see if Sony makes any reactive moves over the next few weeks. But life will go on. And acquisitions and consolidation in as big a business as video games are, the video game business is, just unavoidable. Big fish are going to eat the small fish, and you have mega corporations, and that's just kind of how it is. Not saying you have to like it, but I'm saying you have to be prepared for the inevitability that more of these are going to happen, and that the industry is going to get smaller. It's going to get bigger, but it's going to get smaller at the same time. And for goodness sake, don't make unnecessary suppositions. Don't assume the worst. Don't rely on misinformation. Don't go off of what some person that you saw on Twitter said about this or that, or how because this happened that will happen. Just wait it out. You have no control over it. So getting angry about it or panicking about it or making up all of these different scenarios just doesn't do anyone any good. We don't even know whether the deal is going to go through at this point. So just kind of take it as it is. Understand that any kind of finalized deal is still at least a year away. And just keep playing games, just like you always have. Understand that the way you'll play games will change. But I think that the video game business has always been a business of change. You don't always have to like the change. I certainly don't, if I'm being honest. But that's just kind of how it is. And as I've told people, remember that if you don't like the way that modern gaming is going, you always have the ability to just go back and do what I'm doing. Play the stuff you like. Don't have to engage in the stuff you don't. That doesn't mean that one kind of gaming is better than the other. It's just what you're most comfortable with, what makes you happiest. This kind of stuff, this is what makes me happy. This reminds me when I was young. Heaven knows, with me turning 50 in a few months, I need to feel young quickly. So I have no skin in the race here. Whatever winds up happening, doesn't affect me. Don't have a PlayStation, don't have an Xbox. So whichever direction that the game companies go, not my concern. But as such, because I don't have a horse in the race, I can be more realistic and more practical and more objective about the situation. I can read the tea leaves a little bit better than letting emotions run away with me or letting fear rule the day. Nothing to fear here. Except that I'm not going to be able to finish this race. All right, come on now. So I still have to pass 100 cars. Folks, I don't think that's going to happen. Let's see if I can get to 575 miles. Nope. 570? Oh, I did get to 575. Nice. But I'm done. 577. Almost 578. That earns me a drink. So that's what I think is going on. It's a surprise. It's kind of historic. It's a weird full circle for Activision, having broken away from Atari 40 years ago, and now going back underneath the first party umbrella again. It's kind of strange, but it is what it is. And I think that video gaming will continue to be just fine, even as it gets a bit more consolidated, because the business is just too big. I really don't see a situation where people just flee en masse because there are fewer companies. I think that until something catastrophic happens, and I can't even think about what that would be other than like major economic crises. And even then we saw video gaming thriving during the pandemic. I think that things are just going to continue to evolve and change. And I think that you either roll with those changes or you make the decision to step aside. And either one you pick, that's fine, because what makes you happy is the most important thing. That's it for this episode of Pete Plays. Thanks for hearing me out, watching me race my car around a couple of times. If you have your own comments on the on the Activision Microsoft deal, go ahead and feel free to leave those below if you'd like. You can also check me out on Pete Scarrett on Twitter at Pete Scarrett. We'll do it again soon. Take care, everybody.